Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome back. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast. It's Thursday here in Sydney. It's a Thursday afternoon. It's before Christmas, actually. This episode you're listening to now will come out on the 28th of December, Tuesday the 28th of December, but I'm recording this about a week before Christmas. I've managed to schedule a time with Amir, who's going to join us very shortly. If you haven't been here before, I should just introduce this part of the podcast. This is Owner Stories. PorscheCooled Podcast, this is Owner Stories. Owner Stories is where I chat to, me being Michael Barth, chat to other Porsche owners around the world. We do most of these episodes, or all of these episodes, I should say, through Zoom. It's worked pretty well so far. This is number 63 today with Amir. I think you're going to enjoy Amir's story. Amir has He has a Porsche at the moment, of course. He's had a few before. And Amir contacted me. And when he contacted me, he said, I'll have some time this week to record my episode, which I said is fantastic because he's going to be in isolation. He's in hotel quarantine. So he's going to be zooming in from the hotel room while he's in quarantine because he's just come off a flight. And I think he'll want to talk about that, but I'm just going to ask him when I connect with him on Zoom if he wants to chat about that side of his story. All right, so enough of that. Let's get Amir on the line. Let's get Amir through Zoom, and let's start talking about his PorscheCooled owner story. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Owner Stories. Like I said, I did a bit of a quick intro in the beginning, but very quick. But now I have Amir with me, and I'd like you to welcome Amir today. Amir's coming in from a hotel room. He's in quarantine. Good afternoon, Amir. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, good afternoon, Michael.
I'm glad you came here, and I just want to tell the listeners, Amir is why is Amir in hotel quarantine? Amir is a pilot, so he's been flying. So he's doing. How many days are you doing there in quarantine, Amir?
Doing 7 days. I just arrived from the UK on Sunday.
7 days, so it could be worse. It could be worse. It could be 2 weeks. 7 days goes pretty quickly,
2
right?
weeks. And yeah, and it's. I'm at the Radisson. My company's put me up here, so it's nothing to complain about. You've got internet, you've got food. That's good enough.
True. That is. All right, so I don't know. So Amir is from Brunei. He's based in Brunei. For those who don't know where Brunei is, it's in Borneo. He's an airline pilot. He's a Porsche. He's very passionate about Porsche. He's owned a few Porsches, haven't you, Amir? And you also have a bit of a watch collection, which I want to talk about at the end because I'm into watches, and we have a similar tastes there actually in our watch collection. I've noticed there's a few crossovers that you and I are sharing similar watches.
Yep, that's right. We have some similarities with our collection.
Yeah, and you have one that I'm searching after actually that I just tried on in Bahrain recently, which I've never tried on before, which is the GMT Master, the Coke. You've got a Coke, haven't you? Or is that a Pepsi?
It's a Pepsi.
Oh, it's a Pepsi. I thought it was a Coke. Sorry, Pepsi's just as good. It's almost the same. It's the same coloring, so just a different coloring. But I haven't really tried on the vintage Rolexes that much, and there was one in Bahrain for sale at one of the grey market dealers. The Coke, and I've always liked it. And then I tried it on. I thought, no, this is something I have to put on the list. That's for sure. But we'll talk about watches towards the end of the podcast. Let's get into it, Amir. Let's start talking about your Porsche story because I think you've got a good one. So I always like to start the podcast where it all began. We all started noticing Porsche at some point in our life. Some of us noticed them as a kid. Some of us had happened much later in life. How did it all start for you? Did you start noticing Porsche at an early age, or was it something you saw, when you started working or a bit later on?
Okay, all right. Firstly, before I begin, like I said, I'd like to thank you so much for letting me on this PorscheCooled Owner Stories. Again, just as a background, I've been listening to you for the last 2 years, and I've been following you, sort of silently stalking you. But yeah, I've enjoyed. You're one of the main podcasts I listen to. I mean, I know there's a few others out there, but I can sort of relate. I think it's more of how you come across. It's very good. I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the beginning of the journey for my Porsche journey was when I was about in the 80s, late 80s. I must have been about 9 years old. I was at school, and I I could really vividly remember that there was one of the kids around my age was picked up in a black 911. So I can only, now that I know what year it is, it must have been in 1987, one of those 911s with what is it, the G50.
G50, yeah. So 3.2 Carrera.
Gearbox, 3.2 Carrera, that's right. So it had a whale tail as well. So I remembered that, but I didn't know it was a whale tail. So I saw this kid being picked up by his dad, and I remember thinking, that's the most beautiful sports car that I've ever seen. But I didn't know what it was.
Yeah,
so
it is such.
That was my first collection.
It is an iconic shape, isn't it? I think one of the first ones I saw was similar. It was either a Carrera like that or it was a Targa, I can't remember. And I remember it had roof racks on it and had skis on there. When I saw it in Sydney when I was visiting my brother here, and it was a long, long time ago, but it was something that sticks in my mind, which I didn't really know what a Porsche was at that point.
That's right.
So you see that Carrera. So, sometimes it takes a long time to get into a Porsche, right? So we have those sort of memorable cars along the way, the cars that kind of, I guess in some ways they make us appreciate the Porsche better, more so when we get it. We realize that how great it is, but also cars we might regret selling along the way. Are there any cars along the way that you want to tell the listeners about that were quite memorable in pushing you into the Porsche thing?
Probably not pushing me, but I obviously
that was the wrong choice of words. Yeah,
no, it's fine. The cars that I've had. Well, the first car that I ever owned was a Audi A4, a 1.8 turbo. I think it was 90 in the 97, 98 time. That was my first car.
Okay.
So just to give a back history, I did my airline training as a cadet in the UK, in England. And when I came home in 97, 98, I needed to get a car to drive to work. Now, you must remember I was 18 years old, and I had gotten my flying license before my driver's license. So the first 6 months was my dad sending me to the airport. Right. I hadn't got my driver's license yet. So he sent me in after 6 months. When I got my driver's license, I needed my own car. So at the time, I wasn't one of those kids who was a car geek who knew everything about cars. All I knew was I needed a car and I wanted a nice car. So I wanted to get a Nissan Skyline GTS, 2 doors. If you remember that, it looked like the GTR, but it was the GTS.
Yes.
However, my mother, I'm a bit of a mummy's boy. My mother said, don't get a 2-door sports car because you need to have a 4-door so you can bring us, you can bring everyone. It's easy to transport. So somehow I got pushed into the 4-door super sedan, super saloon, if you can call that a super saloon at the time. And it was a good car, to be honest. And that was probably one of the longest cars I've ever owned. I had it for 6 years. So, because obviously I was a first officer, so the ranking of a pilot when you start off after being a cadet pilot is a first officer. Right. We don't get paid as much as a captain at the time. So during the 6 years, saving money and, having, growing up, when you're 18, 19, you don't know much about the world. You think you do, but you don't. And as you grow older, you get a certain taste of what you like. And then I decided after that, I had a few cars after that, which were like little airport cars, like the Mitsubishi Colt. You remember what a Mitsubishi Colt is?
Yeah.
That was my airport car.
So,
but the first car that I got was a sports car that sort of could push me into the 911 world. Was the Mazda MX5.
Okay. Which is a good car, which is a car a lot of people have owned along the way to their Porsche journey. And some people even have, MX5s or Miatas, as they call them in the US, alongside their Porsche collection. So that's quite a fun car. Yes, it's a fun car. It's small. It's nimble. How is I just want to talk about Brunei, actually. How is the car culture there, the Porsche culture? Do you see a lot of Porsches? Right. Like when you were growing up in Brunei, do you see a lot of Porsche on the road, or do you see a lot of any Ferraris or things like that? Is there a lot? Right. There's not. Okay,
first of all, let me just give you a picture for the whole world. Nobody knows where Brunei is. Everybody sometimes confuse Brunei as Dubai. Dubai in the Middle East. But no, Brunei is a tiny country. And in recent years, I'm not going to talk about the political state of the country.
Yeah.
We have a monarch, which is a sultan,
Yes.
and he's a great king. He takes care of us, the citizens and the non-citizens.
Yes.
And we're treated very well. Everything's we're basically taken care of. Now, paint your picture with tiny country. We're smaller than Delaware State in the U.S.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And our population is 450,000 today.
So it's a very small population. Yeah.
It's very small. And even the 450,000, maybe 100,000 are expats.
Wow. That
So
many.
we're even smaller.
That many.
So you can understand when it comes to the car culture, there's two types of car culture. There's the JDM culture,
Yes.
and then there's the European car culture.
Right.
Sometimes there's a crossover. Sometimes there are people who like both, but there is a difference in the culture.
But I'm guessing the JDM culture is very strong, right? That would be very strong in Brunei.
It's very strong. It's very strong.
No,
because it's more attainable.
Yeah, of course. And the reason why I asked you about that is because it's quite well known that the Sultan of Brunei had an amazing car collection, right?
Yes, he does. I have personally, obviously, I haven't seen it, but he does have all the rare Ferraris and all that. But he has a great car, his daily car, and he's when he drives around, we see him driving around not often, but when we do, he drives this really beautiful Mercedes G class.
Okay.
Not G class. The G wagon. Sorry.
I'm just bringing that in for the listeners because, I mean, if you look at cars that come up on collecting cars, and there was one just recently that was previously owned by the Sultan of Brunei, there's like quite a lot of cars that do come up every now and again where they mention that they come from Brunei, from the royal family. So let's talk about Porsche. Let's talk about your first Porsche. So you start thinking about what you want to get. How long ago did you start thinking, I think I'll start looking for Porsche, and I'll start looking at a Cayman or a Boxster or a 911? How did you go about that, and what did you start looking for, Amir?
All right. So again, I'll just give you another backstory. When I was about 15 years old,
yes,
I was in a public. I was at somewhere called the Science College in Brunei, and it was one of like the best schools where everyone goes to. You're selected. You can only be selected to go to that school, but obviously, I'm not saying that I'm smart, but when I got there, I realized that there were tons of other people who were smarter than me, so I didn't do really well at school.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, half of the pilots in our airline are from that school.
Right.
And that's because even though they couldn't become doctors and engineers and all these top guys, but because of our, I think, cognitive ability and slightly, I'm not saying I'm smart, slightly above average intelligence, we could fly airplanes in a bit. But anyway, so I was at school at 15 years old, and there was one of those career talks. I don't know if you ever had a career talk.
Yes.
So one of the career talks was professional pilots.
Okay.
So when I was 15, a guy comes up in this black 911. And now that I know what 911 it is, it was a 1980s 911, not the same 911, but it looked like the same 911 that I saw when I was 10 years old or 9 years old.
Right.
And this guy parked up right in front of the main hall, the main entrance. He parked it right there, and he got out. And this guy wore a pilot's uniform, and he had sort of like slightly graying hair by the sides. He had black hair, but he looked like one of those suave, debonair pilots in uniform. And he starts walking with his briefcase, and he walks towards us and goes into the halls. And all of us teenage kids looking at him going, wow, this guy is so cool. And then he gives a talk. For about half an hour, and we were all mostly impressed, especially the guys, the boys. And then he finishes off, he walks out to his car, and I think you remember the sound of a flat six.
Yes.
80s air-cooled flat six. And I thought to myself, right, I want to be that guy. That was it. But here's funnily enough, you fast forward, now that was me at 15. 5 years later, I was 20 years old. I was already an airline pilot for maybe about a year or two.
Okay.
And where was I? I was in the back seat of that very car.
Oh, really?
Because the pilot His name is Khalid Khan, Captain Khalid.
Right.
And he was the same pilot who interviewed me as well for my selection.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great story.
This is all like coming full circle.
So that was,
right?
full circle.
And
that's the motivation. So you become a pilot. You haven't got the Porsche yet. When does the Porsche
no,
come?
I haven't. Porsche comes for a long, long time. A long, long time. So I'm not just, people always think that pilots get well paid. We do. We are well paid. But
Yes.
you have to remember, we also need to feed our families. We have to pay for the bills. We have to pay the mortgage. We're just like everybody else. Yes, we get slightly more, but we still have to work. So throughout the journey of my car journey, as I learn, I'm a slow learner. I always learn a bit late about cars. But once I'm into it, I really go deep, especially with Porsche and with watches, with Rolex. So I go really deep in it. I only got the Porsche in 2013. That's a good, that was, I think 14 years, 15 years, maybe longer after I started working.
Okay, so you're sensible as well. It's a sensible way, and a lot of us are like that. Priorities, there's things that happen, like you said, you got to eat, you got to live, you got to look after your family. Porsche is a luxury. It is something we're all lucky to own and to drive and experience. We always think everyone should experience it, and some will and some won't. So we have to class ourselves as being lucky in that instance as well. So when you're in Brunei, though, there's Porsche dealers in Brunei, there's Porsche specialists in Brunei. Are there a lot of cars because you said to me before, and I want to come back to what you said before, it's not a lot of cars on the road. There's not a lot of Porsches out there. They're quite rare. So how do you go about finding one then? Do you buy one directly from Brunei? Do you buy it from somewhere else? How does that work, and how do you find this first Porsche?
Right. So firstly, there is only one Porsche dealership in Brunei. Okay. It's the main dealership, and there are no Porsche specialists. There are only other specialists who do European cars.
Right. And
we'll talk about cost and pricing later. So the first time I sort of got interested I sort of said to myself, I was already a captain, and I was in my early 30s. It's about 2012, 2013. And I started thinking to myself, you know what? I've had my MX5. I had a Golf GTI. I have a Golf GTI.
Okay.
I've done all that. Now I need to sort of think, I want to see whether, because suddenly as you grow older and your salary gets a little bit higher, and you sort of say to yourself, you know what, you do the man maths. And I said, I think I can afford a Porsche. I just have to figure out how much it costs.
Yeah.
So I went to the Porsche dealership and I asked around I went around the cars. And when I looked at the prices, I was gobsmacked. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I don't think I can afford this. This is all expensive. I don't think my wife's going to agree to this. I think we'll have to eat cup noodles if we're going to. Obviously, because I've got a car, other family cars, and I've got a house to pay.
Yes.
But I asked one sales lady there. She was very good. She still works there. In fact, now she's one of the Porsche ambassadors there. And I asked her about Porsche, and she had a Porsche Boxster. And I asked her how much she got it for, and she said something like 25,000 Brunei dollars, which is about 25,000 Australian dollars. And it was a 986. And I thought, well, that's pretty affordable. It was one of the early ones, right? So then we got to walking around where all the, so there's a dealership where all the nice cars are inside. There's always the parking area outside where all the other cars are. Yes. So I walk out and I just started asking her, I just started shooting her with all these questions. Like, what's that car? What's this car? What does this do? Who owns that? Is that car? So she'd be going like, oh, that belongs to this guy, or that's being serviced, or that's repaired. Oh, that guy's, and then she goes to me and says, oh, that guy's fixing that. And then I go, wow, I really like this particular car. My eyes fixated on this blue, a cobalt blue Porsche 987.
Okay.
So I looked at it and I thought, that's a really nice color. And obviously I wanted a 911 because, come on, this is the 911. It was the same car. And I wanted an air-cooled 911.
Okay.
But no one was selling, obviously, because they're not making it anymore. And also, obviously, no one was selling. So I basically fixated on that 987 because it was such a beautiful looking car.
So it's a 987 Boxster or Cayman?
It was a Cayman S.
Which is a good car.
And I asked, it is a good car.
Yeah.
And I said to her, who owns this? And she said, oh, it's owned by this a diver who works in an oil company.
Okay.
I said, oh, okay. And then I know she's not supposed to, but I said to her, who is it? She mentioned a name. And because Brunei is such a small community, I put two and two together and I realized, you know what? I think I know this guy's brother.
Okay.
So I went home and I just started asking questions on my contact list and found the guy's number. And I contacted him on text. And I said, just wondering, I saw your car. Are you selling it? And he said, I'm not really selling it, but I haven't used it a lot. So we struck up a conversation. And because he's a diver, and I knew his brother from flying school.
Yes.
And basically, he said to me that he's owned two GTRs, Nissan GTRs,
Okay.
R35s, and he's telling me he's gone through so many cars. He's basically an enthusiast. He's like one of us.
Yeah.
But I said to him, so what's happened to the car? He says basically the batteries died. He basically said he bought a new battery himself and put it together, but he forgot to reset. When he was buying fuel for the car couldn't start.
Oh, right.
So they had to tow it back, and basically he needed Porsche to reset it.
Okay, so
And
you contact him.
He said to me, I contacted him.
Yeah. And is he willing to sell? Does he eventually gives in because he's got GTRs and he's got other cars and he's not obviously driving it if the battery's gone dead on him.
He basically said that because he wanted to try what was the whole deal about Porsches. He
Right.
said to me, I wanted to know what's Porsche all about. And he discovered that, I think he had it only for about a year, maybe 2 years. He basically said that he wasn't in love with the brand.
Right.
He still loves the JDM. I told you, the JDM cars.
Yeah, very strong. Yeah.
Very, very strong. So he didn't even relent. He said, listen, if you're interested, I'll give you a good price for it. And it was a 2008 model, which is the first gen. So it's got a Tiptronic. And now people will say, oh, it's a Tiptronic. But I had no choice at the time, obviously, and I didn't know much about Porsche. I did do my homework. Obviously, a PDK would have been better, but there was none for sale. So I jumped into it.
But how do you make sure? So this car hasn't been, sorry, Amir, this car hasn't been driven that much, right? It seems like you said he wanted the taste of the Porsche. You see it there. You make the guy an offer. And you did mention to me off recording the fact that there's not a lot of manual, Porsches in Brunei, right? A lot of them are PDKs or they're Tiptronics. How do you make sure this car is okay though? Because we always come back to the very first Porsche you buy. We're all new to it. We don't really know much about them. Do you take it do you ask the Porsche dealer that if this car is sound, this car is all okay, there's no issues? How do you go about that process with this car?
So what I do is I just went to the dealership and I just asked the guy outright. I just went, how's the car? And he said, it's good. All right. I said, okay, what about the service history? And I basically said, listen, I'm interested in buying this car, but I need to know the service history. Does it have a problem? He said, apart from the battery, which costs something silly like, I don't know how much he paid for it, maybe $700-800 to replace and diagnose and reset and everything.
Yes.
He said, there's nothing. The car's sound. And I said, do you mind if I have a look at the service history? He says, yeah, we can tell you there's nothing wrong with it. Because it was like a 3-year-old car. I think. So what happened is the car was 2008.
Yes.
But it had sat in the showroom for about a year and a half.
Okay.
Like I said, nobody just comes to a Porsche showroom and just buys it. I think that's what it is in the rest of the world.
They sit for a little while, yeah. So tell the listeners exactly. So tell the listeners exactly what it is because I haven't really asked you. It's a 987.1 Cayman S. You said it's in blue.
Right. So it's a cobalt blue 987.1 Cayman S. It was Tiptronic. I think the mileage was only 21,000 kilometers.
Very low.
Or maybe even less.
Yeah, very low.
It had sports chrono.
Okay, good.
And it had bucket seats, because we're in Brunei, we don't need any of that ventilated heating and all that stuff.
Yes.
But it was very, very well spec.
And it's a nice color. Cobalt blue is a nice color.
Nice
The sports chrono, and I don't know much about this, and you might be able to fill me in this one. The sports chrono on a Tiptronic, does it improve the Tiptronic transmission? Is it like the sports chrono when it's matched with the PDK? Does it actually tweak it slightly, the gear changes, or it doesn't do anything? Do you know?
Personally, I don't think it really does that much. I mean, we don't have a track in Brunei.
Right.
So we don't go tracking. The cars basically used on the road. So I personally, honestly, I do not see any difference when I switched it, because you have PASM and you have the sports button.
Yes. Okay. So you find this Cayman, the guy's willing to sell it, you buy the car, this is your first Porsche. How was it? Yeah. Tell the listeners exactly how you felt the day you picked it up. Did you pick it up from him? Did you pick it up from the Porsche dealership? How was that first drive? And thinking back at the time of that pilot coming out for that career talk and seeing that 911, and now you're in a Porsche. It's not a 911, but it's still a Porsche. It must have been a good feeling.
Oh man, it's the great feeling. You know what? This is a funny thing. This guy, he must have. I never met him until after I got the car.
Okay.
So he just said, right, you just pick the car up. I said, no, we have to meet. I want to, He said, no, that's fine. Once we had all the deal sorted out, how the payment's done.
Right.
He just went, no, just pick up the car and get, I'll pay the remainder of whatever's outstanding of the repairs. And that's it. I just picked it up. I took it home. And wow, that was a really, with the Cayman, right? The engine's right behind.
Yes.
And you can feel and listen to the sound, the sonorous sound of the flat six. It's one of the best sounding feeling, It's really amazing. It was really a great feeling.
It seems like from people who have owned Boxsters, 986 Boxsters and 987 Boxsters and Caymans, like the sound inside the cabin. I mean, I can't really remember. I've only been in a 986 Boxster a couple of times. But the sound inside the cabin is quite beautiful, isn't it? Because of the positioning of the intakes and the positioning of the engine. And it is a little bit different to a 911, I think, the sound inside a Cayman. I mean, now you own a 911, but you would know. But it seems to be a different experience in a Cayman or a Boxster.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit different because it's close to you. It's really close. And you can feel the
vibrations more. Yeah.
The vibration is amazing. And funnily enough, right, I'm not like one of those guys, you know what they call it? You call him a monkey wrench, wrench monkey.
Wrench monkey.
A guy who knows how to fix stuff, a wrench monkey.
Yeah, neither am I.
But guess what? It was one of the first cars that I owned that I actually did some mods by myself.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things on the 987 is the air conditioning. It's so sticky. I think it's the same like your 997.1.
Oh, the up and down
sticky
toggle switch.
Up and down toggle switch. And I was like, oh my gosh. So somehow I went online back in 2013 and I found somewhere in South America, or was it Mexico, a guy who could send you these stickers.
Yes. So you fixed that.
So I fixed that. That sorted it out. Secondly,
that's a very distressing. I find that very distressing, that little bit of detail when you get into even though it's a used car you're buying, and mine was the same, and you go in and you see those air conditioning toggles like that, where it's just like all rubbed off. Mine had texture, someone to put like black marker to fill in the black, which looked even worse. So that was one of the first things I did as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. The second one was, if you know the 987.1, it's got these circular, below the headlights, they've got circular fog light.
Yes.
Right? Now, it looks all right, but it doesn't look as good. So I bought an aftermarket like mod where you can replace that with little LED strips under it.
Oh, okay.
So I don't remember how much I paid for it, but I ordered it, and when it came, I looked up YouTube tutorials, and at the time, I spent maybe an hour just to change it up. And also there was I bought the mesh underneath it, so that one of those extra things that you can, so that it doesn't go under towards where the what do you call this? The aircon
Oh yeah, the condenser. So the protection,
the condensers,
mesh.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
The
Yeah,
mesh. I bought the mesh.
Right. Yeah, I haven't done that. I haven't done that on my 997. I know that you can do it on the 911s as well, but I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what about the exhaust? You know, I always like talking about exhaust and sound. Did it have a sports exhaust as standard? You said it had a sport button, right?
Yeah, it had a standard exhaust, but no, the guy didn't spec it with a sport button. So I bought an IPE exhaust from a JDM dealer in Brunei. And I think IPE is a Taiwanese company.
They're a good exhaust system, though. They're
valve.
quite expensive, right? It's quite an expensive part. Yeah.
I think I paid $3 or $4 for it.
Right.
And basically, wow, it changed the car. It was so loud, actually.
Was that really switchable, loud. Amir? Was that a switchable exhaust? You could turn it on and off or not?
It was a switchable exhaust.
Yeah, I think I looked at those for my 997 way back earlier on. And when I first got my 997, I looked at the IPEs because I think I read about it on Renlist. And then I saw the price and I thought, no, I'm going to go for a cheaper option. But they were very highly regarded for 997s as well. People thought they were just an amazing sound. So that's
amazing.
Great mod to do. What else did you do to the Cayman before you decided you wanted to move on to your next Porsche?
That was pretty much it. Obviously, with the exhaust, I didn't do it myself because I don't know how to paint it. I had to send it to the guy who ordered it for me. Yep. But no, I had the car for about 2 years, and I really enjoyed it. I took my kids out for it. My wife didn't like it because she said it's too. When she drove it, it was too rough. It was too low, and she didn't understand the concept of a sports car.
Right.
But my children loved it.
But your wife must have driven in the MX5 before. Wouldn't the MX5 have a similar feel? Did she not like the MX5 as well? It's just the sports car feel.
She loved the MX5.
Oh, really?
She loved the top down. Yeah, but I think I never changed. Oh, I put iBuck low springs on my old MX5. My MX5 was the NC, the third, and it was a power retractable roof.
Right. Do you wish you would have kept that one, the MX5, because they're quite collectible now, aren't they? They're getting more and more sought after.
I should have kept all my cars.
That's a good afterthought. So I don't think you've got a picture of the Cayman on your Instagram, have you? I'll just let the listeners know now before we get further into your story. Go and follow Amir on his Instagram. It's at 9alpha. 9alpha as in the German spelling, so it's NEUNELFER, so 9alpha underscore actually, at 9alpha underscore. It'll be in the description of the podcast, so go and have a look at Amir's cars and give him a follow. I don't think the Cayman's on there, is it, Amir, from memory?
There's one picture of it. There's one picture where I wrote down circa 2000 something.
Okay, all right, so there is a picture. Okay, fantastic. So you've owned this car for a couple of years. It's your first Porsche. It's a Cayman S. The 987.1 is a great car. It's a Tiptronic. You would have preferred a manual, but there's nothing wrong with Tiptronics. So then you're driving the car, you think, okay, what I really, really want, and this bug will, has happened to a lot of people who have had Boxsters and Caymans. What I really want is a 911. Is that what happened to you? Did you start actively searching for a 911, or did it just happen one day where somehow one fell in your lap, so to speak?
Yeah. I think it would be, I think we all would be lying if we said once we have a car, we'll never look for another one.
True.
So obviously back of my mind was, oh yeah, I still do want a 911. Funnily enough, that same captain who introduced me to his 911.
Yes.
He years earlier, in 2009, he wanted to sell me his air-cooled 911, which had a Tiptronic. So I think his was a 964, if I'm not mistaken. He had another 911 after that. So he wanted to sell it to me for something. If I tell you now, it was $50,000. He wanted to sell me 50,000 Australian. Cheap. In 2009. Yes, but he had a problem. He said the gearbox was always stuck at 3 or something like that.
Really?
And he said the only way.
That's not a good deal.
You can't drive it in automatic, right? So you had to always change it if you want. You had to physically change it with. So I thought to myself, well, that's kind of I'm not going to buy a car because I think I'd be spending another 20, 30,000.
Absolutely.
For a new gearbox. But he managed to sell it to a buyer from abroad, I think Hong Kong or somewhere.
Okay.
So he had someone else bought it. Anywho, so I wanted a 911, and I really, at that time, I was really desperate. I really wanted a 911, and there was no one, and I didn't want to buy a brand new one because brand new one is expensive.
Yes.
I've got four kids, the listeners, okay, and to you, Michael. I've got 4 children.
Right.
Most of them are teenagers now. At the time, I only had 3.
Right.
So I've got a 5-year-old now. So this is 2021. So in 2014, 2015, I had 3 kids. And one time I drove them around my little village where I live, right?
Yes.
I put 2 of them, they were at the time 5 or 6. 2 of them, and it was just a short drive out the neighborhood and then come back. 2 of them were in the passenger seat. One of them was in the center, pedestal, where the little holder. So there's a picture somewhere of me.
Is that safe, Amir? Is that safe?
No, outside the neighborhood. Of course it's not safe. No, I'm not gonna, it's not safe at all. But, and my wife was upset when she found out. But they always wanted to go out with me. And whenever I go out with them, I could only take one of them.
Right?
So I thought the justifiable reason to get 911.
Yeah. I like how you're going to justify this to your wife, that you need a 911 because you need the 4 seats. This is what we're getting to, right?
This is what we're getting to. So here's the story. I was really desperate. I looked everywhere. I looked online. I didn't want to get a brand new one because it was too much. And so I had to search. So I knew one guy, right, a really good friend of mine, who's it's kind of a bit of a sad story, but sad story because the owner of this 991 was a successful businesswoman who had passed away due to cancer.
Okay. And
she had bought the car maybe 2013, 2014. She had it for about 2-3 years, or maybe 4 years. But during that time, she passed away. But her husband is a good friend of mine. Now, when I had my 987, the first year I had my 987, she had passed away, and she had passed, and we had a drink, we had a sit down, me and my friend, and he actually offered the car to me. But at the time, it was just too much. The balance with the financing, I just could justify it. But 2 years later, when I was really itching for a 911, actually, I didn't remember what happened to the car. So I actually gave him a call. And I said to him, "You got that 911?" And he says, "Yeah." And he said, "Why?" I says, have you driven it? He says, "No, it's in the house. My mother-in-law is taken over the car, and basically his late wife's mom had taken over the car, and she only uses it to drive to her office 5 minutes away from home."
Okay.
Every day? She says, "No, not even every day, only sometimes." And I thought, okay. So he says, "Why?" I says, "Are you interested?" He says, "Well, if you're really interested, I can check with the bank how much is left." So anyway, cut long story short, he told me how much was left. And I thought, wow, that's not a bad deal.
Okay.
So I said to him, I was interested. He said, "You can talk to my father-in-law." And I knew the father-in-law is a really nice guy, a real gentleman. They're a great family. But basically, they didn't have a need for the car.
All right.
So so we agreed the terms, and I picked it up at his house, and he opened the door. He sat in, and it was quite sad. He said, "You know what? I haven't stepped into this car in like 2 years."
Yeah, that's sad.
My wife passed, and it was sad. I said, I stopped, and I realized. I said to him, "You sure you want to sell this to me? Because if you've got sentimental reason." And he said to me, "Nah, you can take the car. I don't drive it anyway." And I went, "Oh, okay, that's good."
But I guess you're a friend as well, so it also helps, right? That you are a friend and it's going to someone that he knows. So tell the listeners what it is, because it's a 991. You said it was a 991. It's about a 2013 model, is it? Just tell the listeners exactly what it was, Amir.
So it was a 2013 991.1, naturally aspirated. It was in Guards Red.
Yep.
PDK. I think the mileage was, again, I think it was only 21,000 kilometers.
So low. Yeah.
It's so low. And it has 20-inch Carrera wheels.
Yes.
And it's just a Beautiful car. Now, to be honest, I'm not really a red car kind of guy. I'm more of a darkish color, like sort of a toned down
Yes.
color kind of guy. But because I was so desperate, I wanted a 911. I just said, I'll take whatever I have.
But I'm looking at your Instagram. I mean, tell the listeners every option it has, because you've obviously added things to this. And I'm looking at your Instagram, and the 991. I'm not a big red fan either. I'm not a big red Porsche fan.
Okay.
But I think in the 991, and I've seen a few of them, certain colors suit certain generations, and I think the red actually works quite well with the 991. I'm not a big fan of red 997s. I think when they're different type of reds, like the metallic Kamola reds or the other reds like some of the owners have had, I think they're okay. But I think in the 901 and yours, and especially because I've noticed yours has got the Porsche script stripe on the side as well, which actually really does bring it all together with the wheels. And I love those wheels because they're those, what are the wheels called again?
I think they're called Carrera Wheels. I don't really know, but I think it's Carrera.
Yeah, and there's a picture on your
Instagram.
Carrera S wheels. There's a picture on your Instagram, Amir, the side profile one where you're parked in a car park. It looks like it's in front of a mosque.
Yep.
And that is just, it's a great shot. It's a great looking car. And also you've got the black leather interior, have you? Is it leather interior or just part leather interior?
Yep, it's got leather interior. It had sports chrono. I think you know what? I think every time the Porsche Brunei dealership bring in their cars, they spec it with sports chrono. They spec it really high and
spec it higher.
Mostly leather. And this decal that I bought was from a place in the US called KI Industries or KI something.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've heard of that. I
don't know whether they're still around or not. I don't know whether they're still around, but
a lot of those, a lot of the decal places got closed down by Porsche. They wouldn't let them operate anymore. Even the guy I think that I got my decal from doesn't actually operate anymore. So what was the experience though? Because you had the Cayman, right? And you've gone in, and the Cayman's a Tiptronic. And we always like about talking about that driving experience. So you pick up your first 911. Now you're in the 911. It's not a black one. It's not an air cool, but it's a 911, and it's a PDK.
Yes.
You like the idea of PDK. Yes. How was the experience from driving the PDK? Well, two things. How was the difference between the feeling that you had, the difference between the Cayman, and also the difference between the transmission? Which one was a bigger difference, you think?
Well, I think it's quite obvious here. The PDK is better than the Tiptronic. For no question asked. When my friend offered me, I had the 987, right, and he offered to sell it to me. We were talking to each other, and that was the first time I drove his car. He said, "You want to drive the 991?" I said, "It's your late wife's car. I don't feel good driving it." He says, "No, it's just like it's like a Porsche. Just drive it." So I drove the car on the highway in Brunei, and oh my gosh, the PDK was like, if you ever played Gran Turismo game, it was like boom, 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 boom. It just, whereas the Tiptronic had a bit of a lag, right?
Yes.
So I just drove it really fast on the highway. I came back. I brought it back to where my car was parked, and I said, "Look, I think I should stop driving this car because the longer I stay, I'm going to want this car. I don't think I can afford it." So that was the first time I drove a 911, his 911 anyway. But when I got the car, it was amazing. It was the PDK was night and day from Tiptronic, and then I realized, okay, this is PDK is not bad. In fact, it's not even not bad. It's fantastic.
It's fantastic, which a lot of people say a lot of people say when they get the PDK, it's actually very, very good. So the car itself, though, Amir, it was in good condition, right? Like you said, the mother was driving it. Had regular servicing, everything was in order. Was there anything you had to do when you picked up the car? Did you have to get a service done?
So what I did was, because I was now more knowledgeable in certain cars. Now, when I got the 987, I was aware of the issues with the M97, M96 engine, which is some of it with IMS, some was poor scoring. So I was aware of it. It wasn't like I was walking in blind. But I was happy with how the dealership had told me, and I actually also looked. They were very open about it. But on the 991, now you have to remember the 987 is a pretty mechanical car, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's got all the ECUs and all all that, but it doesn't have as many computers. And just like aeroplanes, I've flown. My first airplane was a Fokker 100 back in the 90s, and then I flew Boeing 767s, and then I flew Airbus 320s, and now I'm on a 787 Dreamliner pilot, right? So these machines,
which must be amazing, by the way. Which must be amazing when you're in that cockpit of that plane. It must be an amazing feeling.
It is an amazing feeling. I mean, sometimes I pinch myself and ask myself, how the heck did I get here? But that's how life is. The journey is, right. And so the 767, the Boeing 767, is like a naturally aspirated hydraulic power steering, air cooled, because you didn't have fly by wire.
Okay.
The Airbus 320 is like electric steering. The Boeing 787 is like driving a 992. It's got so many computers.
Okay.
So the 991, it's like flying a plane with a little bit more computers, right? And it's a GT car. It's more for on the highway. That's how I felt anyway. I felt like, it's slightly bigger, longer wheelbase. And so I was a bit worried when before I bought the car, I thought, you know what, I better do a PPI. So I paid for a PPI at the dealership. So I paid for the dealership PPI. They had like 1,000-point checks, whatever checks they had. And they just came out with, by the way, you need to replace the tires. You need to change the battery. And I was like, oh, is that it? Yep, that's it. There's nothing wrong with the engine. Nope, there's nothing wrong with the engine. This is a solid car. 991s are solid cars.
Oh, that's good.
The dealership said they don't have many problems with 991s.
That's good. So just general maintenance items, just things you would think that would happen anyway, tires, batteries, just normal sort of things. So it's good you got a PPI anyway, because it is a slightly higher purchase, isn't it? It's more money. Yeah. It's more money than the 987 Cayman S. So you've got the 991, because I want to get in before, I want to get into your current car. So you've got the 991, you're in the 911. Did you have any issues during the period of ownership? And how long did you own that car for, Amir?
So I owned the car for about 2.5 years, maybe 2.5 years. So I bought, after the PPI, they gave me an option to buy an extended warranty.
Yes.
Because the car was 4 years old. And I did my calculation. I went, you know what? This is a car which has some computers, and I bought it for a lot more. And I don't think I'd like it if it breaks down in the first 2 years. I don't think I want to dip into my savings or my emergencies. Yes. So I bought a two-year extended warranty.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the thing that came out during the 2.5 years I had was, the roof line of the interior cabin?
Yes.
It started dropping.
Really?
The fabric just started sort of... Yeah, it was... I don't know whether it's a European car thing. It's pretty common in Brunei. Maybe it's because it's hot. I don't know.
I know it happens in Bahrain. In Bahrain, it happens to a lot of cars where the roof lining will fall. But is that a common problem with the 991? Have you seen that come up on the forums or anything? I haven't seen that as a common problem.
I haven't seen that, but I did ask the guy, and he says, no, it's sometimes it happens, but I guess it's happened now. So I said, well, it's under warranty. Can you have it replaced? So this was like 2-3 months. So mind you, 2-3 months after I bought it, the car was probably on its 5th year.
Right.
So it was under warranty, and they ordered the parts from Germany, and it came in about a month. And then they called me in, and it took them about a few days to install it. And I think it cost them, I saw the bill, it was about $4,500 Australian dollars.
So it was worthwhile then. Having the warranty was definitely worthwhile then. That's for sure.
It was definitely worthwhile.
Absolutely.
And then on the second year, I had noises coming from the bushing on the front left. The front left. Every time you go over a hump,
yes,
I could hear on a slow speed. You could hear like the kadunk, kadunk sound, and I was like, something's wrong here. Something, when you're a pilot and you hear noises, you always go, okay, is the car drivable? Yeah, it's still drivable. On high speeds, there was nothing.
Okay.
Took it to them. To the dealer, and again they said, yeah, you need to replace your left arm link or one of the joints to the front. And he says, when we replace that and it's under warranty, we might as well replace the right one as well.
Yeah, they do it in pairs.
So I was like, I said, okay, fine, do it. And then that cost another 4,000 or something like that.
Well, there you go. That's the bet. Getting a warranty if you can get one, it's a good thing, isn't it? Even though you had the PPI, nothing showed up. These things just happen after you take ownership. Definitely worthwhile.
That's right. And the last thing was on the driver's side of the seat, it's leather on the door panel. It started coming. I think it's because of the heat. I think the glue started coming off, and it started coming towards me. You know what I mean?
Yes, I've actually that one I've heard about. That's a common problem though with the 991.1, right? That's happened to other people. I've seen that.
I didn't know that.
The top part of the door, right? The top part of the plastic of the door. Yeah, that's a common fault with that car. I think James at Auto Amateur on YouTube, I think he had it happen to his 991.1, and I did see something on probably Renlist or Piston Heads or something in the UK that was a common issue with 991s that you should look at. There was something with the glue, the earlier glues they used or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got
I had that replaced. I had it replaced, and that cost God knows how much. So in total, I thought to myself, well, it's a good thing I got the warranty.
Well, it makes you want to get it in the future, doesn't it? If you've used it that much, it really does make a difference. Like you said, you didn't have to go into your savings. You took the preventative measures. You did a PPI. Nothing shows up, but these things just happen. I've just had a huge bill on my 997, but that was just not because it was left for 2 years, but because it's a 16-year-old car and things happen and you have to eventually get things, replaced. And they all add up. It's not the price of one thing, it's the price of 3 things or 4 things, isn't it? And that's what happens. So Amir, you're in the 991. I want to talk about the next one because it's something close to me, and I'm a big fan of the 997. So why do you decide to sell the 991? Do you want something more analog? Are you looking for an air-cooled? What made you switch it out for your next 911?
Okay. So as you know that as you get to know a car, you get to discover its the idiosyncrasies and the foibles, or what you like, what you don't like. One of those videos where I think you've made one of these, like 5 things I hate about the 911.
Really?
5 things I love about the 911.
Yep.
So if I would make a video, one of the things that I didn't like about the 991 was the size of the car.
Okay.
So coming from an MX5 and a Golf GTI and a Suzuki Swift Sport and a 987 Cayman, I discovered that, this car's quite, and it's a sport, it's not a sports, the suspension is a normal suspension. So it sits a little bit higher than what I'd like. Yes. Obviously, I could probably get an aftermarket, but I was just too lazy to get one because it's a daily car. I don't have any other car except for my family car when at that time. So I didn't want to have a lowered car and have to deal with, avoiding, one of those humps, and you do one of those sideways things that always, we have to do. I didn't want any of that hassle.
Yes, I do it all the time. I know what it's like.
So, okay. So I just didn't like the size. I could feel that it was slightly bigger. I don't know whether anyone on a 991 community can relate, but one, that was it. Number 2 was the color kind of bothered me sometimes. Sometimes I feel like I don't want people to see a red 911. I want to drive I like either a black or a silver or a gray or a dark blue, or do you know what I mean? That's the sort of car color that I would, or white even, but not a Guards red, which is beautiful. Okay, on the 991, it's just beautiful. Lastly, it was the steering.
Okay.
The electric steering wasn't that great.
Right. Which was the change from the 997 generation to the 991, right? Where they changed the steering.
Correct.
Steering feel changed.
So the 987 Cayman was a hydraulic steering system, and this was electric system.
Yes.
And even though I've had other electric cars, I don't mind having electric steering on a normal family car or a normal car, but on a sports car. And what I've now read on the internet is the first earlier versions of the electric steering of the 991 wasn't that great.
Okay.
And that sort of now that I understand it, like, oh, no wonder it didn't feel that great. I think the 991.2 is, I read about it, is better. And
It's
even
better,
now,
isn't it?
the 992 is really, I think people are saying 992 because I've got a couple of friends who've got 992 and they say
Okay.
the steering is amazing. So,
All right. So the feel of the car, the steering, the size, and then you start searching, you start searching for another 911. How much choice do you have when you start searching though? Because already you've said, the Cayman you found, by contacting, the guy that you saw the car, the diver, the 991, the 991 was a friend. She passed away. So how do you go about finding something smaller? So you're going to start looking at 997 or 996 or air-cooled. How do you find the next car, Amir?
So one of the things that I've sort of, the itch that I needed to scratch was a manual 911. And it's very hard to find.
Right.
Nobody buys a manual 911 in Brunei. Everybody's just PDK. So I asked the dealership if they were bringing in the 991 Carrera T.
Okay.
And I had just missed the boat. They said they don't make it anymore. So that's not an option. So I sort of went, okay. But I knew that I wanted a smaller sort of more smaller 911.
Yes.
There was a gentleman selling a 911 Targa, a 964, for about 80,000 Australian dollars.
Okay.
But I think it needed a lot of work on it. And I didn't want to, I'm one of those guys who, like, you buy a car, you get in, you drive it.
Yes.
I don't want to spend too much time and money fixing it because I just don't have enough time. I've got work to do. I've got, kids to send to school too.
Yep. So you need a well-sorted car. You want something you can drive pretty much straight away.
I want something that if I'm going to, that's right. That's it.
But even though it might need some basic maintenance, tires, basic things like that, that's all good. But you don't want any major problems. So how do you find it then? Because there's not many cars in Brunei. We keep coming back to this. There's not many Porsches there. So how do you find this car?
So what I found out was there were cars coming up on the used dealer market. So during COVID, 2020, in 2020, some people were selling their cars.
Right.
But obviously they didn't. I think what happened is they don't want to they're just selling their car to the used dealers to get money, or they're trading it for something else.
Okay.
Maybe another different type of car. So I noticed that on the used dealership, on their Instagram or on their social media accounts, I noticed in 2020, there were like 2 or 3 911s popping up. But every time I look at it, within a day, it was sold.
Right.
Because that's how sought after the 911 is.
But can I ask you, Amir, can I just ask you before you go any further? Is this because of COVID? Were the prices going up in Brunei as well? Was the used market, the prices going up? Because we know a lot of people during COVID, they were selling their used car and buying new cars, right? Or trying to buy a new car because you could make quite a bit of money on the 911 you already owned. Was the price going up in a big way in Brunei, or was it quite stable?
It was quite stable.
Okay.
Because what happened is there's a glut of cars, used market cars sold because I think I'm not sure how the economy how it really works in terms of the car business, but I can only imagine that some people were losing their jobs and had to get rid of their cars.
Okay.
Yeah, especially in the transport industry. However, the economy is still running because but people had more money actually.
Yes.
In 2020, last year, the Porsche Brunei had their best sales year ever.
Really? Wow.
Because all these rich, wealthy people are not flying off to do their spending $50,000 on their holidays. So guess where they're going to spend their $50,000?
Yeah, there's excess cash.
It's on a 992 turbo or a 718 Cayman or Porsche Macan.
So they're trading in they're obviously Porsche owners. They're not first-time Porsche owners, right? So they're trading in their previous models to get up to the 992. So you're seeing more on the market.
Correct.
Because the car you bought, and I want you to introduce it shortly, the car you bought, which is in the title anyway, but it's quite a rare car. The 997.2 is a rare car. It's not easy to come about in PDK or manual because not a lot of them were made.
You're so right. You know what? I was so lucky. This is what's happened, right? I was scrolling through Instagram.
Yes.
And on one of the the explore page, and it's always cars. And I saw this gray 997, and then I clicked on it, and I went, wait a minute, this is in Brunei. And then I looked at it. It was in one of the used dealership that was about an hour's drive away. By the way, just to put in context, when you drive from one end to Brunei to the other, it's only 1 hour.
Okay.
So it was quite a journey. So I looked at it and I thought to myself, right, I'm going to have a look at this. This car just came out. It just came out on that post that very day. So I went the next day. I brought along my son. And I said to him, we're going to look at 911s. And he's about 11.
Right.
He looked at me and said, are you getting a 911 again? Right. So when we arrived there, I see it right there in the lot of the used car dealer. And the first thing I looked at it and I said, okay, Carrera 2, it's fine. 997. And I knew, all right, yep, the dot 2, it's got, because only the dot 2 has the PDK.
Yes.
And the first thing I said was, has anyone bought this car to the sales guy? And he said, well, there's one lady, actually one lady who's had a look. There's 2 guys who've come earlier this morning, but no one has said it. And I just said to him, you know what, Michael, this is the problem with me. I can be very impulsive. I just said, right, I want to book this car. I want to take it for a test drive. He says, right, just take it for a test drive now. Okay. So I took the car out with him and we took it around he asked for my details. I had to fill a form and all that. And then I drove it around for about 20 minutes. And I just knew straight away, like, this is it. This is the car.
So did you buy it on the spot?
I bought it on the spot. I basically said, listen, I've got a flight tomorrow. I'll give you a deposit. I'll transfer money to your account. I didn't even check the PPI. How crazy was I? How crazy was that?
Did you check it afterwards? Did you check it afterwards?
But before I actually said I'd buy, I called the dealership in Brunei and I just called the service guy who I knew very well. And I said, do you know this car? So-and-so. And basically I asked about it. And he says, yeah, has this car always been there, all the history of it? It's like an 11-year-old car. He says, yep, we know that car. It's good. No problem.
Oh, that's good.
We know the owner. We know the previous owners. He had 3 previous owners before.
Okay. I want you to...
It was all serviced there.
Let's tell the listeners exactly what you bought, because this car, your car really interests me. You know what I mean? Because the color. Like, I only realized, I think, probably last week when I was looking at your Instagram again, that for some reason I thought your car was silver, and then I thought it was white, and then I realized it's not. It's a really unique color that almost looks like the sports classic color. And I'm not sure what it's called.
Correct.
And I'd like to know if you found anything about the history of that color and tell the listeners. But just tell the listeners exactly what you found and what you now drive, Amir.
Okay. So apparently the original color of the car is black. So the previous owner before me must have decided that he wanted to make it into a sports classic.
Oh, really?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so he colored it in the workmanship of that paint is so good. And it was called crayon gray. Right?
Yes. So it's like the classic crayon chalk color then. Is that what it is? It was
correct. It was like the sports classic color. And I looked at it and I thought, and to be honest, I didn't know anything about the sports classic.
Right.
Before I bought the car. It's only after I bought the car that I discovered, there's something called a 911 Sports Classic. I did some homework and I realized, wow, there's 250 of these sports classics. Well, something ridiculous for
Yeah,
200,000 pounds or something.
exactly. So the previous owner had a complete paint job done on the car. He completely changed the color.
Completely everything. It was a really good job as well.
Did you look into that though? Because, sometimes that scares people when cars have had a, repaint. I mean, there are people now who are changing the color of their cars. We see them on YouTube. They're buying new cars and getting them resprayed.
Yeah.
How did you
true.
check that was going to be okay though, Amir, but that there wouldn't be any issues for you down the line? Because it's not a new car.
I checked. So what I did was I knew straight away that I realized I looked at the history of the ownership of the car, that the car used to be black.
Right.
Because I had met this car before when it was in black color.
Right.
It was in Brunei so the previous owner had owned a detail company.
Okay.
So he had kept the car in his detailing showroom. And I realized that I've met this car before because it's one of there's only like one or two 997.2 Carrera 2s in Brunei. So it's not like there's 10 or 20. There's only like 2 or 3.
Wow.
Or 1 or 2. So I knew this car straight away, and I did the research of the history. And I realized, my God, I know this car. It used to be black. But I wasn't bothered because when I looked at the paint, it was really good.
It looks really good. It looks really good in the video. That video that you've got, video that you have where it's in the Porsche dealer and it's on the lift and it's going up and the paint looks beautiful. It really does. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's good. So I wasn't worried. I did check. So the first thing I did was the used car dealer. I know the owner. He basically sent before he sells a car. When he gets a car, he sends it to the dealership. He doesn't have his own or he doesn't send it to his other workshop. So he sends the servicing to the Porsche dealership.
Okay.
So the whole history of the car was with the dealership, the Porsche agent.
Right. That's good.
Looking back at it now, that was pretty reckless not to do a PPI and all that.
But it's so rare, though. Like you said, there's only a few of them, a handful in Brunei, right? You probably have you seen all of the 997.2s in Brunei? Have you actually seen them?
I've seen a Carrera S.
Yeah.
I haven't seen all of it, but we have a small Porsche community. We have a Porsche owners group.
Okay.
In Brunei, and maybe 3 or 4 times a year, they have a big event where they all do a meetup and a drive.
Fantastic.
But I rarely go because I'm flying. I probably join only once a year.
Busy, yeah. So the 997, your current car, your 997.2 Carrera 2 PDK, it's in crayon, so we know that color, crayon, like the sports classic color. What other options do the car have inside? Is it full leather? Is it got sports exhaust?
It's full leather, no sports exhaust. It's got sports chrono. It's got PASM.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's got the tip wheels, the tip controls on the steering wheel.
Yes.
But it doesn't bother me because with an automatic PDK, I just drive PDK.
Yeah.
I've used it before. It's not too bad, but I think it would be better with the paddles. I might go and change the paddles.
Which you could do.
I've been so busy this year.
Which you could do. You just change the steering wheel, right? Which is quite an expensive cost, but you can change the steering wheel.
£900 or £1,000?
Well, it depends on the airbag price. I mean, if you have to change your airbag out, I don't know whether you have to change your airbag out, but if you have to change your airbag, well then... Yeah. Actually, no, you've got the round airbag, haven't you? I'm just looking at your picture. You've got your round airbag.
Yeah.
So it's not it's just the steering wheel. So it's probably like probably £1,000, $1,000 or something like that.
It doesn't bother me, to be honest. It doesn't bother me. Well, right now it doesn't, but I'm just happy to be driving it.
Fantastic. So how is the feeling then from the 991 to the 997? Because you said, the motivation was getting a smaller car, getting something with the better steering. You still got PDK. How was the
PDK? The PDK is slower on the 997 than the 991. The 991
understandable.
is better.
Yeah, understandable.
The 991 is a better car.
Right.
It's a better car.
Really?
But when I say better, that's all subjective. So
better. The 991 is a better car.
It's a better car. It's not a better Porsche.
Okay.
So you've got to understand that difference. Because I've had experience now driving two different Porsches. In fact, I'll tell you what. Again, I've driven a 928. Back when I was in my 20s, I had it, and I've driven other air-cooled 911s from different friends. And you just know that the Porsche DNA is like, it's a sports car. Okay,
Yes.
It's like
yes.
it's some, and that was what was missing on the 991. I don't want to disrespect 991 owners because it's still got the 911 DNA. But in terms of what I want out of my Porsche 911, I think the 997 is, for me anyway, is the peak Porsche 911 for myself.
That's a good way of looking at it. That's a good way of looking at it. So how is it when you go on a spirited drive in the 997? Does it feel fantastic?
Drive, it feels fantastic. It especially on the back roads, because it's small enough. And it vibrates a little bit more than the 991.
Okay.
So you can hear the engine more, and you can hear it's more mechanical. And because the PDK isn't as good, because mind you, the 997.2 was the first time Porsche ever put PDK in their cars.
Yes.
So
it's the first iteration, isn't it? It's the first iteration, so it makes sense that the 991 is better, and the 992 is probably even better still. That's how it works. I mean, look, the 997.2 is a great generation. I mean, I've got a 997.1, as you know. I don't think about IMS, but I'm guessing when you have a 0.2, there is a slightly better feeling there that that you're not going to be plagued by any other issues in the future. Not that I think anything's going to happen to my car, but very few of them, for people who don't know who are listening, 997.2, there weren't a lot made because it happened around the GFC and that period, the recession in 08, 09. So there wasn't that many being purchased or being made, I guess. So they are quite rare, and even more so, like you said, in Brunei. So you've got quite a special car. And that color, I mean, it really does work in that color. It makes it kind of, I mean, I just read the article the other day, Amir, that, Porsche is doing all these new PTS colors, and you can do the paint to sample, and you can do whatever color you want now, and it's going to be on their configurator. And, and I think there's a good reason for it, because, you do cars in these other colors, and like you said, this is like the sports classic color. It'll look good with the stripe on the side, yours as well, by the way. Does
it? I've actually toying around with the idea of making it into
bonnet stripe,
a bit of a sports classic.
You could actually.
I wanted to get a ducktail. I wanted to get the front lip, and I just thought, do I want to go that road now? Do I really? Because it's going to go into spending more money. When at the end of the day, you know what? I've learned through the years that you just drive the car and just don't worry too much about how much it looks. Well, obviously the looks is important, but just driving the car, if that makes you happy, that's almost good enough.
The thing is, though, you don't really need to do anything, do you? Because it looks fantastic how it is. The image I'm seeing you where you're parked at Porsche Center Brunei, and I think you're next to a 992, a grey 992, and
right.
And you look at the two cars together. You look at the back, like we keep talking about Porsche DNA. It's so clearly apparent in both cars. You know what I mean? You look at the back. It's like it's. It doesn't matter what generation you have. It's all there. The history of Porsche is so apparent in each generation, and each model, like whether it be a Cayman, a Boxster, or 991, a PDK Tiptronic, they're all Porsche. They're all special. And I've always said in a few of the previous episodes, we get hung up on the what's better and what's not as good and all this, but they're all good. You know what I mean? They're all good in their own special way. And it depends what you want. And like you said, for you, even though, and I thought it was interesting, you're saying the 991 is a better car, but for you, the 997 is the better Porsche. It's the Porsche that you want. And I think that's a good way of looking at it.
The Porsche that I want. Yeah. I mean, you can listen, if I was a 65-year-old guy, I would get the 991 or whatever, 992, whatever it is now, because it's a smoother ride. It's got all the bells and whistles. It goes faster, and it's got this beautiful PDK. It's got everything. I would probably have that, but now I just turned 43, and I feel like this is for now the 911 for me. So I'm not going to slag off any 911 because I'm a 911 fanboy, and
exactly.
I just think,
I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, I'm not a fan of the 992 because I don't like the digital dash. I prefer the more analog dash, and that's why I wouldn't go any further along the line than a 991 because I like how it's, the dash is still kind of more analog, and they don't like the new digital dash. And I guess that just happens when new generations come out. There's always things that we don't like at first. I think we eventually all come around. I still think Porsche did a really good job with that, with the dash on the 992. I still think the dials and everything look pretty special, especially by keeping the center dial the way it was. I think it's still pretty special.
Yeah, the 992 is a beautiful car. I think it's the prettiest looking sort of, how do you call it? It's just the way they design these things. It's just
absolutely
the whole evolution of cars.
So, Amir, we're getting to the end. We're getting near the end of the podcast because we always like to keep them to an hour, or I like to keep them to an hour. We're about an hour and 15.
Right.
A couple more things I want to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is let's go into the drives, the favorite drives. Like if someone's coming to Brunei, is there a particular road in Brunei where if someone's going there and they're going to hire a car or they've got a friend that's there, or where would you take your 911 or sports car in Brunei? Is there a special, it's only small, as you said, but is there a special road there that you would recommend?
There is a special road. Well, special for me because it's near my house. It's only 5 minutes away. It's the Subok roads. So they're quite meandering and they're hilly. They're in sort of you don't have to drive fast.
Right.
Just drive the normal way. But the fact that you can drive MX5 there and just enjoy the whole, it's almost like canyon carving.
Okay.
And there's another road that links to it, is the Kota Batu road. Road's a bit rough, but it's by the river and you can sort of see glimpses of the river by the houses. And I would recommend it there. But generally, we don't have that many roads in Brunei. I just go, whenever I see a corner, I just love corners,
But you're traveling a lot, right? You're a pilot, you're a captain, you're traveling a lot. What about when you're in Europe? Do you get a chance to drive any cars in Europe when you're traveling, or in London? Anything exciting?
I've never driven in Europe, but I just came back from the UK and I rented a Fiat 500. It doesn't go very fast. And it was in manual, but I'm not really that familiar with the roads in the UK. Although I've driven in Perth. I rented a car once to go to a golf course there. I've never driven in Melbourne, but I hear a lot of great roads there. But no, to be honest, I'm just going to be honest. I haven't really. I don't know much about roads outside of my country.
All right. Hey, watches. Because I know you probably we need to finish, but watches. Your Instagram is just like a treasure trove. There's everything there. There's some great things. And like I said, there's some similarities.
Really,
and I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question, which is going to be a hard one to answer. Which is your favorite? Because you've got the Pepsi, you've got a Black Bay Bronze, which I have, but you've got the first gen. I've got the grey. You've got the vintage root beer, which I think would have to be probably my pick. My wife's got the latest version of that. She's got the latest.
Which one is the root beer? I don't think I have the root beer.
You don't? Isn't that on your Instagram? Isn't that yours?
I don't think it's a root beer. Oh no, it's not mine.
Oh, that's not yours?
Some of these watches aren't mine.
I thought they were yours. Sorry, my mistake.
Some of them are. No. The vintage root beer is owned by a friend.
That's a very nice watch.
Yes, and there's a gold Rolex that's not mine. No. It's some of these watches I bought it at a time when they were relatively attainable. Now they're just ridiculous. It's I think I've sort of weaned myself out of the watch collecting sort of hobby because it's just getting too expensive.
Too expensive and too difficult.
Too difficult. I've got 3 kids who I've got to put through university in a few years' time, so I've got to save up for their. Like I said, you got to be sensible, right?
So this is your last 911 then? That's it?
Well,
You know
what? I'm looking at this. You know what? I still want a manual, either manual 911 or there's one car that's always popped up in my mind. That's the Cayman GT4 or the Cayman GTS 4-liter.
Yeah, that would be a great one. The GTS 4-liter, I think. Yes. The GTS 4-liter would be a really good one.
I'm just not willing to I don't want to let go of my current 911 and then suddenly realize, that was a big mistake. I should have just kept the 911.
But the GTS...
So what I do is
The GTS are quite expensive though. They're still around 200, aren't they? Or they're less in Brunei.
Okay, like I told you earlier, if you live in Brunei, the GTS 4-liter from the Porsche configurator is about 150 to 160,000.
Yeah, which is very good.
The GT4 is 185, 190.
See, I think if you're in the market, I think as much as I like that GTS 4.0, I think if you're in the market, you go the GT4. I think you'd have to push it to the GT4. If you were switching out your if you were switching out your 911, I think you would have to go the GT4. Yeah, but I don't think you should. I think you should keep the one.
Yeah, right. My wife says no, and my son says it's not practical.
It doesn't have 4 seats. You can't get a GT4.
It doesn't have 4 seats. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So so just to finish up on the watches bit. Yeah, I don't know which one. I like your Panerai. I really like your Panerai. I don't know whether it would suit my small wrist, but I like when you post pictures of it. I'm like, that Panerai looks so good on Michael's hand.
Yeah, I do like it. Is the Tudor GMT, is that yours?
Yeah, so here's a funny story, right? The Tudor GMT is mine. However, I'd let go of it.
Oh, did you?
Because so I can get the Tudor GMT easily because where I fly off to, I know where all the good dealers are. In fact, I was in London at Westfield a week and a half ago, and I saw 5 Black Bay GMTs at Westfield.
Yeah, they were. It's a weird one, that watch, because I was on the wait list for it in London, and one came up, and I didn't take it up myself. I bought it for a friend, so I picked it up and I bought it for a friend. But that was when they weren't available, and we're in Canary Wharf area in London when we're there, and there's a lot in the shops around there. There's a lot of GMTs available now.
Yeah.
Even the bronze, even my bronze, which wasn't available, the grey bronze, the 2019. Yeah. They're in the window now, so you can see the market is slow. People are there are watches available. There's no Rolexes, of course. There's no Rolex.
No Rolexes. Rolexes don't even ask. I was in Singapore 3 weeks ago. Nothing. I saw a Yachtmaster, and it was exhibition only.
Yeah.
Everything is empty. And then I just asked them a funny question. I said, "Do you have any steel Rolexes?" And then they said, "I'm so sorry, sir, but they're not available. There hasn't been any available in the last 12 months. You'll have to be on a waiting list."
It's difficult. Like I said, I've had I had the opportunity to buy them in Bahrain, and I bought a few in Bahrain, but I had opportunities to buy recently, but the prices have just gone crazy where they're just they're too high. From an official dealer, they're actually higher than retail, so it's just crazy. I wouldn't pay.
Yeah, the market's gone crazy. So I would probably. I'm looking at IWC right now.
Oh yeah, nice.
That Mark, either the Mark 18. I did see the Big Pilot 43, but I think it's a bit too big for my wrist.
I really love the Big Pilot. I think that's a great watch. It's worth a try on, that's for sure. The Big Pilot's a great watch. As is, and the Speedmaster. The Speedmaster is yours, Amir?
Yeah, I've got that was my first mechanical watch, the Speedmaster.
Is it? That was my first one as well. That was my very first one.
I think if you're watch collecting, you should at least own that once. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, it's if you can afford it, but if you can get a used one, you can get used ones. They're not that expensive.
No, they're not. And people have asked me that question, and I always say that first. I say get a Speedmaster Professional if you can get one. It doesn't have to be a new one. Get an old one. Get a vintage one. But I think the Speedmaster Professional, for the size of it, the reliability of it, it's such a reliable watch compared to my Panerais, which have been serviced quite a lot of times. Apart from this one I've got on, the mechanical one, the hand winding. But the automatic Panerais they're just quite troublesome. They need a lot of servicing. So.
I've got one that I'm looking at, the Seamaster 300. I don't know. I was a kid of the 90s, right? I was born in the 90s. Not born. The 90s was like Nirvana, Oasis, and one of the things that I remember was watching. Remember James Bond 007, Pierce Brosnan.
Goldeneye.
He had this GoldenEye. He had this blue Seamaster that could shoot laser out.
Yeah.
And I always liked that watch. And now I'm looking at the market and I'm like going, it's affordable. Should I?
No, Amigas are still a good watch to buy. I mean, at least with Amiga, well, most of them you can still get an Amiga. You know what I mean? Apart from the Snoopy one, which just came out, the Speedmaster Snoopy, which no one can get. But most Amigas are quite easy to find,
Right.
except for that one.
Can I just finish off my story now?
Yes.
Going out of watches and just to telling you the full circle.
Yes.
So I saw.
Well, I was just going to say to you, Amir, before we
Yeah.
go, is there anything else you want to say to the listeners? So let's finish it off with this.
Yeah. So the 911 that I saw from the pilot who came on the career talk was 1980s 911. He interviewed me for my job for the cadet interview. I was in the back seat of his car because he had brought me for a ride with another pilot during one of the times that we had a meetup. And years later, I bought my own 987 and then a 991 and finally my 997. And now we work together because we're now friends. We're good friends. And this is the funny bit. One day, he saw my car and I sent him home. And I said, like, why don't you drive it? So he drove my 911 and I sat there and I thought about it and I thought, my God, it has been 25 years and this guy was the reason why I'm now flying.
That's
and
a great story.
He looked at me and he just smiled and I keep on telling him, like, you're the reason why I bought this 911. This is your fault.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's that day you saw him getting out of his 911, walking into the school to give you that career talk and you become friends.
Exactly.
And it's like, now you're a pilot. It's great. It's a great story.
Yeah, it is. So I think you get these little inspiration. It doesn't have to be a 911, it could be anything. It could be any car. It could be any goal that you want. But as long as you hang on to it and you work hard for it, and it's not, you might not get it now. You might not get it next year. But if you work at it and you just don't give up on something, it'll eventually come. I think that's what I believe anyway.
Well said. Yeah. Set a goal and just remember it's not going to happen. It might not happen today, but if you have, if you have faith in it, it will happen eventually. So I think that's a great way to end the podcast.
To all the listeners of your this podcast, thanks for hanging on to this, to listening to my story, and click and subscribe and comment. And I was going to intend of being one of your patrons, but I always keep on forgetting.
That's all right. No
Be
problem.
a patron for Michael. He's got a great podcast. Just the
support of listening, and I really appreciate you telling me you're listening to the podcast and listening to it. It's just those sort of stories make me want to keep doing it. You know what I mean? It's a labor. I'll call it a labor of love, a passion of love. Great. And so it's your owner's Amir, your owner's story is number 63. So we're up to number 63 already. Wow. That's what you are.
Wow, that's a lot. I'm impressed, really. The fact is, I listen to you on my school runs.
Okay.
My school runs like 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back. And it's just really, and it's informative as well, because I learned things about certain things like the prices and also what's wrong with certain cars. And there's certain nuggets of knowledge that I thought, I didn't know that. I didn't.
Oh, that's great.
And it's because of you, because I look at the 996 in a different light now.
Yeah.
Because I used to think the 996 was the ugly duckling. But now that I think about it and I look at it, and every time I look at it now, it's like, it's actually a nice
things are changing.
car.
Things are changing. When I saw that image in that, before we go, that image in the Porsche Unseen book, which is a great book. If anyone hasn't bought it, you should buy it. Porsche Unseen, with all the concept photos of the Porsches. There's a picture in there that I think is like a pre-996 or something based on a 996. And you get to, I think you appreciate the 996. And I've said this before in an earlier episode. You get to appreciate the 996, the curves of the 996, you know what I mean? Which you don't really, which you overlook because you're so transfixed on the headlights that people are always commenting about, or the yellow amber markers on the earlier models. But if you just look at that shape, it really has aged very, very well. I mean, as Porsches do, as 911s do, it really has aged very well, and the designers had such an insight when they were doing that car. You know what I mean? And it's had a lot of criticism, and I think it's actually come back around, which is good. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Amir, thank you so much. Thank you for being on Owner Stories today. Thank you for joining me from your hotel room quarantine. It's been great, from Brunei. Really appreciate it.
No. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share my story. I really enjoy it. Thank you so much.
It's a great story and full circle as well. Fantastic.
Yes.
All right, everyone. That's thank you, Amir. All right, everyone. That's Amir coming in from Brunei. Amir has owned a few Porsches from that very first Cayman S, that 987.1 Cayman S. He's red 991 Carrera 2, and now he's very special in that unique color in the crayon 2009 Porsche 911 second generation 997 Carrera 2 in PDK. All right, everyone. That's it for the PorscheCooled Podcast today. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.